It won't be a surprise to you when I tell you that you need to keep your accounting documents in some way. However, I often notice that there is quite a bit of uncertainty regarding, first, which documents actually need to be retained, and second, for how long. Because there are legally, that is, in the commercial code and in tax law, two deadlines that you should be aware of. There is a retention period of 6 years and another of 10 years. Let's start with the retention period of 10 years. This is the period that is generally quite well known. And you actually have to keep your important core tax documents for 10 years. That means your invoices, the invoices you receive, your bank statements, your tax return, VAT return, your inventory, your annual financial statements. So you can say that you actually have to indeed retain the core tax documents for 10 years. And they must be stored in such a way that they are actually accessible and retrievable for 10 years. However, what many do not know is that you also need to retain additional documents. Specifically, there is a retention period of 6 years, for example. Other business correspondence, which includes, for example, your emails and the letters you send, must be retained. But also things like offers, your reminders, contracts, and so on. This means that all information that is crucial for getting a better picture of your tax situation must also be retained. Many people actually don't know that you actually also have to keep reminders and offers for 6 years. But why should you do that? What happens if you simply throw away your accounting documents every year? Then, in the case of a tax audit by the tax office, there is the possibility to estimate the tax base. This means that they can simply go ahead, and if you cannot provide documents, for example, from 8 years ago, then the tax office can just estimate your revenues and profits. And when the tax office does that, it is usually to your disadvantage. This means you will have to pay back taxes. And in the worst case, they might even accuse you of intent. In such cases, it is quite possible that we are then talking about tax evasion. And tax evasion can end, in the worst case, with imprisonment. At this point, I want to make a very, very important note, because I see an extremely common mistake regarding the retention period. This applies to both self-employed individuals and tax advisors. The crucial question is, when does this 10-year period start? 6 years actually means 1,000. And the law states that the retention period only begins to run at the end of the year in which this document was created. And that means that when you file your tax return or your tax advisor files your tax return for 2020, it will only be done in February 2022. That can happen. And if you have a tax advisor, it's even still within the legal deadline. This means that the document tax return 2020 is created only in February 2022. Thus, the 10-year retention period only begins at the end of approximately the year 2022. This means on January 1st, 2023, the 10-year period will start running, and it will end at the end of December 2032. This means that the retention period for the tax return for 2020 in this example only ends at the close of the day, January 31st, 2002 and 30. Intuitively, one would say to retain the tax return for 2020 until January 1st, 2003 and 30. That's more than 12 years. But it is indeed the case that you need to carefully consider which documents were created when and for what they might still be relevant. You are actually on the safe side only if you keep your documents for about 2 to 3 years longer than the 6 or 10 years. I hope this video has given you a good overview of when you are allowed to destroy which documents or how long you need to keep them. Just check out our other videos, like this one.